Kinji is a student who tries to stay under the radar and joins a prestigious battle academy to become much stronger than before. However, when he and his partner are attacked by a terrorist, he contacts her physical charms, unlocks his hidden power, becoming the very strongest, and defeats every single one of them. This story starts with Kinji preparing for his first day at a new school named Butte Academy, which was created to train people known as Butte to fight crime using weapons of a military nature. While Kinji is cycling to the campus, he sees a machine gun following him on a bike, and then hears a voice telling him to keep driving at full speed because a bomb attached to his bicycle will explode if he stops or reduces his pace. He is confused since he has not even started school yet, but with the machine gun on his heels, he accelerates to survive. Moments later, Kinji sees a girl watching from the edge of a roof and thinks she wants to send herself to the other world. However, she jumps and uses a parachute to follow him before eliminating the pursuing motorcycle. After Kinji tells her about the bombs attached to his bicycle, she uses her modest charms as airbags to push him away, but the explosion leaves them both unconscious. Minutes later, Kinji wakes up in a warehouse and wonders why there is something warm on him until he looks up and sees the same girl, Arya, passed out on top of him. To make matters worse, he can see her figure and almost wakes her up with his involuntary physical reaction. The next moment, Arya wakes up and attacks him because she thinks he was trying to shoot her in the back while she was unconscious. But before Kinji can explain himself, a group of motorcycles loaded with machine guns pulls up and starts firing, so they both hide in a bulletproof box. After telling Kinji to stay still, Arya loads her guns and keeps shooting at the bikes until they retreat. Then she tells Kinji they will be back, but suddenly Kinji goes from being a helpless coward to an overconfident master of seduction. He lifts Arya naturally in his arms and tells her not to worry about anything else. After he takes her weapons, the machine guns return for a second round, but when they launch the first burst of bullets, Kinji calmly dodges like a cheap version of Neo and shoots right into each of the weapons, making them explode. Seeing this makes Arya feel strange, but she hides her amazement by accusing him of playing with her charms. After Kinji hands her his belt like a true ladies' man, she gets frustrated and decides to fight hand to hand, but Kinji calmly evades her and grabs her magazines before trying to load her weapons. She still decides to attack and pulls out her swords, only to trip over her own bullets and hit her slight figure against the hard ground. After leaving her to recover what is left of her self-esteem, Kinji explains his special power called Hysteria mode, a skill that was genetically transmitted to him and only activates when he is stimulated, which increases his confidence and his skill with weapons to the point where he basically becomes the reincarnation of John Wick. However, it also turns him into an overconfident seduction demon, which usually leaves him embarrassed when he regains his senses. Later, Kinji arrives at class and sees the short-tempered girl already waiting for him, who takes a seat next to him and says she actually transferred to the academy to watch over him. After returning the belt, everyone in the class supports them and says Kinji must have already fallen for her because she had his belt. The next instant, Arya starts to explode and promises to finish them off if they ever accuse her of that again. Later that day, Kinji is at his house trying to figure out why they attacked him when an insistent person starts ringing the doorbell. The next moment, he sees Arya, who forces her way in with her things and orders him to become her servant. Minutes later, she orders him to make coffee and also food, but Kinji barely understands what is happening and asks her what she meant by becoming her servant. Arya then explains that he will join her assault group to go on missions, but Kinji immediately refuses and says he hates assault groups before also revealing that he plans to stop being a Butte. At this, Arya calls him a spineless coward, and when he insists he cannot do it, she ignores him to explain her position when they start going on combat missions. Then she points to her box and says she is not going anywhere until he agrees to join her team. Kinji tries to refuse once more, only to be kicked out of his own place. So he finally decides to pluck up his courage and sneaks back into the room. But then he sees that Arya has just stepped into the shower. He immediately considers sneaking out again, but then he hears the doorbell and sees an old friend named Shiryuki outside. After opening the door, he asks her why she appeared dressed like that, and Shiryuki explains that she finished classes late and could not wait to come and ask him how his first day at the academy went. When she asks him about the incident that happened before, he tells her everything and assures her he is fine, but she gets angry and promises to punish the culprit until they look like SpongeBob. Then she tells him what she prepared for his dinner and tells him she will be away for a couple of days to attend a training camp. Despite seeing her generous attributes about to pop out of the dress, Kinji responds with his usual tone so she can leave. The next moment, Shiryuki hears a sound coming from the bathroom and asks if he has someone there, but Kinji denies it and closes the door even more. Suddenly, the sweet Shiryuki lets herself be consumed by a demonic fury and asks if he is hiding something from her. Kinji denies it once more while almost wetting himself, and surprisingly, Shiryuki believes him. Then, she wishes him good luck in training and slams the door in his face. With that out of the way, he decides to hide Arya's weapons because she will definitely try to attack, but she finds out that he sneaked back in while she was in the bathroom. However, just as he finds them, she comes out and freezes in shock because her charms are completely exposed. Kinji tries to explain himself immediately, but then accidentally activates his Hysteria mode, which she misunderstands and spends the rest of the night trying to attack him. him. Later, he creates a barrier to keep her away from the bed, and while she sleeps, Kinji tells himself that he must stop being a butte, no matter what. The next morning, Arya wakes him up with a punch to the stomach and orders him to make breakfast. This time, he refuses and holds her with one arm before realizing that, despite being a death machine, she is easy to handle physically. After getting ready for school, he tells her to leave before him, so people do not get the wrong idea. But Arya sees this as his plan to escape from her, so she sinks her teeth into his arm. While he drags her along, Professor Sayanaki begins the first class explaining the academy's curriculum. During the first 4 periods, regular subjects will be taught like at any other school, and then they will split up and take classes according to their divisions. While the assault ones practice with their weapons, the logistics division reproduces scenes from Fast and Furious. He further explains that they can use the extra periods to perform solo missions for civilians. Much later, Kinji selects a task that he can use to escape from the academy and from Arya, but she appears and tells him to forget about escaping. Surprised, he falls to his knees and asks her why she is not training with the other students in assault, so she tells him she already has enough credits to graduate. Later, she continues following him and asks for the task he selected, but he refuses to tell her, so she threatens to use her gun. Then he explains that he only has to find someone's lost kitten, and of course, Arya decides to follow him. In the end, she is hungry and makes him buy her food, but as she enjoys the meal, he tells her he does not feel that close to her because they are not in a normal park. She is confused by this, but after looking up and seeing couples in every direction, she becomes shy and forgets how to act. Kinji then says her boyfriend will definitely feel jealous if he sees them together, but Arya reveals she has never experienced love and claims she is not even worried about it. However, Kinji can see through the obvious lies and realizes that talking about love and intimacy makes her nervous. Much later, he finally finds the lost kitten, and while Arya watches, Kinji slowly reaches out to grab it. He makes the mistake of ignoring the cat's hisses and regrets it after it scratches his face and makes him fall into the water. After finally managing to escape from Arya, Kinji meets his attractive but strange classmate Rico, who gives him the video games he requested in exchange for information about Arya. Then she hands him the file and asks why he cannot just ask Arya what he wants to know since they are dating, so he explains that they actually get along very poorly. Rico then tells him that Arya is mainly called Arya the Quadra in the Butte world because she uses 2 guns and 2 swords. Kinji finds it interesting and decides to continue reading before finally returning home to confront Arya about her true identity. Apparently, she comes from a highly respected noble family in Europe because her grandmother was awarded a title by the royal family. It turns out she is also a high-ranking Butte working for the London agency with a nearly perfect arrest record of 99 because she never lets the victims escape. After she says her record has actually been broken, he asks about the person who managed to escape from her and finds out it is himself. Confused, he asks why he is on her criminal list, so she reminds him that he touched her charms the other day. She also demands to know about the powers he used to stop the machine guns, but Kinji claims he just got lucky since he is still a rank E Butte. Arya immediately tells him to stop lying because she knows he is a rank S, who was only demoted to E because he missed his exams. While she pins him down and demands to know the truth about his powers, he tells her to stop because he cannot activate it at will. Then she asks if there is a trigger and offers to help, but after feeling that her closeness is about to activate Hysteria mode, Kinji pushes her away and agrees to join the assault team, but he will only go on one mission with her so she can leave him alone. The next day, Kinji heads to the assault class when he runs into Rico. She immediately takes his class selection form and is surprised to see that he chose assault as an elective. Before she can ask why, he claims Arya forced him, but Rico already believes they are dating in secret. However, she also notices he is stressed, so she reaches into her uniform and pulls out tickets for an arcade before giving them to him and telling him she will be too busy to use them. Kinji expected her to want to show him something else, but he still thanks her for the tickets before going to class. Upon arriving there, he sees a group of his former classmates who are happy he is coming back to entertain them. After saying he has no intention of being their comedian again, he regrets his decision to return. At that moment, Arya appears, and after everyone runs to hide from her, he follows her and she realizes he is quite popular among the boys. Then he claims to hate all the attention, but Arya thinks he is lucky because at least he gets some attention, while everyone hides from her because they are afraid of her powers. After noticing that her name basically means alone, Kinji asks if that is why she is so obsessed with working with him, but Arya laughs and says he is too slow for someone with so much skill. After telling her to go home so he can enjoy the arcade in peace, Arya says she does not even know what an arcade is because they never had them at home, so she decides to join him. But Kinji is already tired of her, so he runs off, but she chases him until they reach the arcade. With no other choice, he decides to let her stay, and quickly realizes she has been staring at the stuffed animals in a crane game since they entered, so he tells her to play. Unfortunately, she does not know how, and even after he explains it to her, she spends all her money and does not get a single one. Then he takes control and manages to win 2 plushies for her. Minutes later, they depart, and when she gives him one of the plushies as a thank you gift, he is surprised because he always thought she had a cold heart. Moments later, Kinji realizes his watch has been ticking the wrong time, so he fixes it. The next day, he ends up missing the bus because his watch started acting up again. But before he can decide his next move, Arya calls him to tell him the bus has just been hijacked and a bomb was put on it. The bomb is also similar to the one that was placed on his bicycle, which means they cannot slow down. While they agree to meet, the students on the bus try to find the bomb, but then a car appears with an automatic machine gun tied to it, so everyone ducks to avoid the bullets. By then, Arya has just met Kinji, and as they drive towards the bus, she tells him this is another attack from the Butte killer. Kinji is confused because they already caught the killer, but Arya then explains they caught an imposter because the real killer obviously still plants bombs and sends remote-controlled weapons to attack students. Seeing how determined she is to save everyone, Kinji also decides to get involved, but then she reminds him this is the only mission he promised to undertake with her, which means he has to use his true powers. Back on the bus, the students are instructed to head to a more populated area, and Arya quickly realizes this, so they drive towards the nearest crowded place, hoping to cross paths with the bus when Kinji says he is not as strong as she thinks. She promises to protect him, but still expects to see some of those expert-level skills he used the other day. By then, the bus has just entered a tunnel, so the students decide to shoot at the car so they can deactivate the bomb before it reaches civilians. However, the moment they get up to shoot, the weapon's heat sensors are activated, so it immediately unleashes a hail of bullets that knocks everyone down and leaves them in immense pain. Although they are lucky to stay conscious thanks to their bulletproof uniforms, the bus driver is knocked out. When the bus begins to veer off course, one of the boys takes the wheel, but the gun picks up his heat signature and aims at his head. Fortunately, Arya appears with Kinji and shoots at the car's tires until it loses control and crashes. With the bomb still active, Arya jumps with Kinji to deactivate it, but while she looks for it, Kinji discovers the bus has a fuel leak and they need to keep it moving to stay alive. Fortunately, Arya finds the bomb, so Kinji tries to help, but she recognizes the bomb's design and says she can deactivate it on her own. At that moment, Kinji learns from a friend named Shiryuki that there is a sensor somewhere on the bus. He then leaves Arya to handle the bomb while he looks for the sensor, but she quickly realizes her arms are too short to reach the bomb. By then, Kinji has just found the sensor, but after pulling it out, a second car appears with a machine gun tied to it. While it fires at Kinji, Arya jumps in front of him and takes the hit before shooting at the car. While she faints in Kinji's arms, the bus leaves the tunnel, and Kinji sees a sniper named Reki following them in a helicopter. After successfully aiming at the bomb, she manages to get the perfect shot that dislodges it, causing the explosion to occur in the water. Much later, Kinji appears at the hospital to see Arya, but then he runs into Reki and asks how she knows Arya. Reki then explains she is a client who called before the mission to ask for help. She also notes that Arya was quite confident in completing the mission since he was going to be with her. After their conversation, Kinji enters Arya's room to see how she is, but she acts as if her injuries were no big deal. After she also claims that risking her life for him was standard procedure, he tells her to stop lying, which makes her angry for saving him. Kinji then delivers a report of the incident and explains how they could not find a single clue about the Butte killer. The next moment, Arya throws it in the trash and tells him to get out. Confused, Kinji tries to talk about it, but she refuses to hear another word, so he turns to leave when she admits to being disappointed in him. He tells her to stop expecting him to become a gunslinging superhero, because he already told her he does not even want to be a Butte. After this, she says her time is running out, and when Kinji asks her what she is doing, she starts to realize that maybe he is not the one she needs. Several days later, in a dream, Kinji relives the worst day of his life. After a cruise ship exploded at sea and sank rapidly to the bottom, the rescue teams managed to save everyone on board, but they realized the explosion was related to a Butte who was on board. It turned out that Butte was Kinji's older brother, and after the incident, journalists made his life impossible while they kept asking questions and blaming Kinji's brother for not doing his job. Kinji finally wakes up soaked in sweat and upset at having to remember such a traumatic event every day. He then takes a walk to clear his mind and remembers that his brother was actually the reason everyone on board that ship survived, but he was still blamed for the explosion after losing his life. This was what made Kinji realize that sacrificing himself for ungrateful people was not his dream life. At that moment, Shiryuki sends him a text message to check if he is okay, but Kinji ignores it before seeing Arya leaving a shop dressed like she was going on a date. The usually carefree boy then proceeds to follow her all over town and struggles to understand why he is so obsessed with knowing what she is doing. After arriving at a police station, Arya finally sees Kinji and decides to take him with her. However, instead of meeting some criminal boyfriend, Kinji is surprised when she takes him to meet her mother, Kanai, who is currently accused of being a killer. After seeing Kinji, Kanai thinks he is Arya's boyfriend and teases her until she gets nervous. Kanai then apologizes to Kinji on Arya's behalf because she can already tell his left hand drifted to one side after she appeared. Arya quickly dismisses this to tell Kanai that Kinji is the latest target of the Butte killer. She further explains that proving Kanai's innocence can reduce her sentence from 864 to 742 years, although that does not make much difference to her. After Arya promises to get her out before her case reaches the Supreme Court, Kanai asks her if she she has found a reliable partner to go on missions. After Arya hesitates, Kanai reminds her that taking on missions alone is too dangerous, and besides, she cannot use all her powers until she finds someone compatible. Despite this, Arya says she does not have enough time to take things slow, but Kanai insists she hits the brakes for her own safety. As the visiting hours come to an end, Arya promises once more to give Kanai her freedom back, but Kanai tells her not to oppose an organization called the European Union, EU, without first getting a compatible partner. After leaving the station, Arya tells Kinji to stop following her, so he steps back and watches her as she walks in the rain and starts to cry. The next day, Kinji finds out that Arya missed school, so he decides to spend the day investigating the crimes Kanai is accused of. When he finally finds out why Arya is so desperate to have a partner and why she keeps saying she does not have enough time, Shiryuki appears to tell him that Arya is taking a flight back to London in a couple of hours. Minutes later, he starts walking home and convinces himself that Arya's decision to leave him is the right thing because he can never become the partner she dreams of. At that moment, he receives a text message from Rico about the Butte killer, so he heads to see her and lets her treat him like her servant just to get the information he came for. Finally, he decides to get down to business, and she gives him something called an event possibility report related to the accident that cost his brother's life. Rico also thinks the Butte killer is somehow connected to all this, but then she starts acting strange again and ends up activating Hysteria mode. However, instead of giving her the attention she wants, he leaves her on the couch and goes away. Minutes later, he is at the airport rushing to catch Arya's flight because he thinks she is in danger. Thanks to his Butte status, he manages to pass security and get on the plane. But when he tells the flight attendant to ground the plane, she says it will not be possible due to standard regulations. With no other choice, Kinji quickly finds Arya just before the plane takes off, and when she demands to know why he is there, he reminds her that their agreement was for him to take on a mission with her. As they never found out who the Butte killer is, their partnership is technically still valid, but Arya does not want to hear another word because she is already convinced he is not the one she wants. While she continues to act like she can handle anything on her own, a loud thunderclap reveals the inner weakness she has been hiding behind all that big talk. Feeling how scared she is, Kinji decides to save the reproaches for later and comforts her until she starts feeling better. He then tries to keep talking about the Butte killer, only to be interrupted with gunfire and an announcement that the plane had just been hijacked. The voice then orders all the Butte on board to go up to the bar on the first floor for a battle royale. At this, Arya tries to act like she is ready again, but another thunderclap puts her back in her place. Then she agrees to team up with Kinji, and while they head to the bar, Kinji tells Arya that the Butte killer has been targeting her family this whole time. Moments later, they arrive at the bar and are surprised to see Rico, who then introduces herself as Rico Mine Lupin IV, great-granddaughter of Arsène Lupin, a famous man known as the French Phantom Thief. When Arya asks her why she is doing all this, Rico explains that it is the only way to gain enough respect from her family to be called by her true name and not some other irrelevant number named after someone else. She also admits to being the Butte killer and explains she did it all to prepare for her final confrontation with Arya, who apparently is called Holmes IV. She chose Arya as her target because their great-grandparents fought each other in the past, which means defeating Arya will solidify her name in the Lupin family records. Rico goes on to explain that she planned everything, from the bomb in Kinji's car to the trick with his faulty watch that made him miss the bus, because she wanted them to become partners. When she admits to being behind what happened to Kinji's brother, Kinji loses his cool and launches an attack, only to be defeated in seconds. Arya then takes control, but quickly realizes she can only get a good hit at close range due to the bulletproof uniform. To make matters worse, she has fewer bullets than Rico, which drastically reduces her chances of success. Fortunately, Kinji manages to control his anger and helps Arya subdue Rico, but then Rico reveals another secret. She also uses a sword like Arya, and after cutting her, she shoots Arya directly in the chest at point-blank range. The bullet leaves Arya unconscious while Rico starts laughing madly. Kinji immediately grabs Arya and runs straight to the nearest room he can find before realizing that Arya is slowly losing her life. In a desperate attempt to save her, he opens her shirt and injects her with an emergency medical liquid. Fortunately, this brings her back, but she immediately kicks Kinji away and accuses him of trying to take liberties while she was unconscious. However, as soon as she mentions Rico, she remembers they have a psychopath to stop. She immediately takes her gun to resume the fight, but Kinji stops her and tells her she cannot do it alone, especially after taking a bullet to the chest. While she continues to struggle to overcome him, Kinji suddenly kisses her to activate Hysteria mode. The shock makes her knees weak, and when she accuses him of stealing her first kiss, he calmly admits it is also his first kiss before promising to protect her. At about the same time, their classmates learn of the hijacking and immediately launch an operation to connect to the plane's communications and help Arya. Soon, they find out that another Butte is also on board, and while they try to figure out who it is, Rico finds Kinji standing calmly in a room and enters to ask for Arya. The next moment, Kinji throws an oxygen tank at her and uses the distraction to attack, but Rico evades him and tries to eliminate him. However, Kinji uses his skills to cut the bullet in half, and Arya immediately shoots Rico's guns before using her swords to cut her hair. She and Kinji order Rico to surrender, but Rico suddenly uses her strange power to control the ship, which takes them both by surprise and gives her a chance to escape. At the same time, their classmates notice the plane's altitude is decreasing fast, but before they can do anything, they are disconnected. Back on the plane, Kinji tells Arya to go fly the plane while he chases Rico and finally finds her on the deck with bombs wrapped around her. When she tells him to join the European Union by her side, he asks her what the European Union is, but all she says is that it is paradise on Earth. She also claims he will be able to reunite with his brother, but Kinji refuses. Then, she shoots off the plane and turns her clothes into a parachute before sending 2 missiles to destroy the main engines. Kinji quickly runs back to the cockpit to tell Arya what happened, and while they try to control the plane, they get a call from National Defense and they update them on their situation. After this, he calls his friend Muto, who is with the others at school, and after explaining their current situation to them, Muto realizes they have less than 10 minutes to land the plane because those missiles destroyed the fuel tanks. They try to keep talking, but National Defense calls back and tells Kinji and Arya that the airport they should land at is not available for reasons they cannot explain. They then suggest taking a detour to the Pacific Ocean for an emergency landing. So Arya tries to steer the plane in that direction, but Kinji stops her because he can feel something is not right. The next moment, Muto intercepts the call and tells them National Defense has decided to give up all efforts to save them because they think it is not worth the risk. To make matters worse, they have also sent gunships to shoot down the plane if they refuse to head for the ocean. Despite all this, Kinji stays calm and suggests landing on a runway at the academy, but Muto says it would be impossible. He then suggests an abandoned runway as their best chance to land in time, but Kinji can barely see the runway since it has no lights. When he starts to panic, Arya takes his hand and assures him they will not lose their lives over this. Moments later, they approach the runway and are surprised to see lights coming on to give them a path to land. With Muto's help, they manage to perform the landing without losing anyone. The next day, Arya finds Kinji resting on a balcony and asks him why he came to save her because she could have handled everything on her own. Suddenly, she accepts she would never have survived without him and says that is why she needs a partner and that is why she will go look for one. When she asks him to be her partner one last time, Kinji refuses again, so she heads straight for the helipad with a broken heart. At that moment, Kinji sees the plushie she gave him after their day at the arcade and changes his mind. But when he reaches the helipad, Arya has already taken off. Despite this, he continues to yell at her to come back until she hears him and jumps out of the helicopter like a madwoman. Much later, they return to their dormitory, so they ask why Rico called her Holmes IV. Arya then says she is actually descended from Sherlock Holmes, but Kinji refuses to believe this impulsive girl is related to the greatest detective in history. At that moment, he hears Shiryuki banging on the door and demanding to know why he has not been responding to her messages. After Kinji grabs his phone and sees she has been calling him insistently, Shiryuki destroys the door and loses her cool after seeing Arya. As she launches herself to attack Arya, Kinji steps aside and is surprised when Arya casually catches the sword with her palms as if it were nothing. Despite this, Shiryuki presses even harder to cut her, but Arya jumps back and takes her gun to level the playing field. However, after firing, Shiryuki deflects her bullets with the sword, which makes Arya realize this obsessed girl also has superpowers. Kinji explains she is a chute, which is basically a butte with superpowers. It turns out she is also part of Hotogi Miko, a group of very powerful shrine maidens famous for their special skills. Students like her receive training in a special subdivision of the academy called the SSR Division. While the girls keep fighting, Kinji finally decides to intervene, but then Shiryuki grabs him and apologizes for letting someone like Arya steal his heart while she was away. Then she resumes the fight with Arya and continues to accuse her until Arya says Kinji is just her servant. Shiryuki stops immediately and is convinced they have been practicing the fantasies she wanted to try with Kinji all along. Kinji quickly explains that they have only joined up to go on a mission together. At this, Shiryuki gives a sigh of relief and says she is grateful they did not do anything like kissing. However, when they both start making suspicious expressions and remember the kiss on the plane, Shiryuki feels something is wrong and realizes they have indeed kissed. As her anger rises again, Arya tells her not to worry because nothing else is going to happen, but this makes Shiryuki faint while Kinji wonders how a person can be so naive. The next day, Kinji tries to talk to Shiryuki about everything, but she decides to stop acting silly for once and ignores him. Minutes later in class, the teacher tells them about an upcoming festival where the academy gives the general public access to its facilities. Muto asks Kinji if he plans to do anything for the festival, but Kinji says he really cannot do anything due to his low rank. Muto then suggests working at some of the stalls, so Kinji tries to ask Arya only to see she has been reading strange books. The next moment, she slaps Kinji in the face because she misunderstands the situation. Much later, he is surprised to see Arya in a cheerleader outfit, and after saying it is for the festival, she also claims to have been researching his powers. However, after she says it activates whenever there is danger, Kinji realizes she is still wrong because it is simply a genetic condition, so she decides to start forcing him into stressful situations situations through intense training, hoping this will activate his abilities. Minutes later, Kinji tries to stop it and end this once and for all, but the aspiring cheerleader keeps shoving her charms in his face until he gives up. The next morning, Kinji heads to class when Arya attacks him and tells him the training was pointless because he should have been able to use his powers. While he tries to explain it is not that simple, they hear a teacher asking for help finding Shiryuki over the communication system, and Arya immediately drags Kinji so they can spy on Shiryuki. Moments later, they go up into the vents leading to the teacher's office, and Arya explains that Shiryuki has been trying to avoid her since the other night. When they reach the office, Miss Yumiko asks Shiryuki if her grades have dropped because she is worried about a criminal named Durandal, who is said to target Chute like her. After saying Durandal is just a myth, Shiryuki admits she has just been distracted lately, but Yumiko insists she needs a bodyguard, especially now that outsiders are about to enter the academy. Shiryuki refuses, saying she will not be able to take care of Kinji, with the bodyguard following her everywhere. At this, Arya comes out of the vents and offers to be her bodyguard at no cost, but Shiryuki says no again. Arya then threatens Kinji, so Shiryuki reluctantly accepts, but only on the condition of moving in with Kinji and also being his bodyguard. Later, Arya tells Kinji that capturing Durandal will help reduce Kanai's sentence, but Kinji does not even believe Durandal exists. After Arya threatens to end him, they hear something breaking in the other room, so Kinji rushes in and sees Shiryuki trying to pick up the pieces of an important vase. She apologizes immediately, but he tells her not to worry since he can always get another one. On the other hand, Arya sees them acting very close and struggles to control her jealousy. As the days pass, she begins to clash with Shiryuki over the most insignificant matters, just to prove she is what Kinji needs. Finally, Shiryuki complains about this to Kinji and admits she is afraid Arya will separate them, but Kinji reminds her that Arya is just a partner, while she has been his best friend since they were little. This makes Shiryuki remember the past, the day Kinji took her out of the shrine so she could have her first experience with the outside world. That day felt like a Disney movie to Shiryuki because there was also a festival happening and she got to see the fireworks with Kinji. When they finally returned, Kinji got a scolding for taking her away, but he kept coming back to spend time with her, which explains why she is so attached to him. Much later, they return to the dormitory, and while Kinji gets ready for a shower, Shiryuki suddenly gets a call from him and runs to the bathroom thinking he needs help. After he says he did not call her, she realizes her mistake and apologizes, but he says it is no big deal. However, after also noticing he is shirtless, she decides to go in too. Kinji tries to stop her immediately, but when he grabs her, Arya walks in and thinks they are about to do something improper. Then she pulls out her guns and starts shooting like a madwoman until Kinji jumps into the water. While they both keep fighting, he decides to risk his health because it is better than trying to stand between them. The next morning, he ends up with a very high fever, so Arya leaves a new bottle of medicine on his bed before leaving. After he finally wakes up, Shiryuki runs to see him and apologizes for what happened, but he tells her not to worry and thanks her for the medicine. She is confused but decides to let him think it was her gift. Much later at school, Kinji sees almost all the girls dressed as cheerleaders. Then he heads to the roof to check himself, but Arya appears and kicks him. After saying his training has really been a waste of time, she tells him to find another way to get stronger because Durandal is rumored to be strong enough to cut, steal. Kinji still thinks all this is a hoax, but he is too exhausted to argue. Arya then says she has to check Shiryuki's phone because Durandal usually sends threatening messages to potential victims. When Kinji asks her why she is not watching over Shiryuki, Arya explains that Reki is currently watching her. Then she tries to threaten Kinji, but after he reminds her of his illness, she stops and decides to be nice for once. However, Kinji says it is no big deal since Shiryuki's medicine really made him feel better. Arya is surprised by this since she was the one who bought the medicine, but instead of clearing that up, she tells Kinji to marry Shiryuki since he cannot stop talking about her. Kinji then tries to assure her that things between them are not that deep, but Arya refuses to listen and reminds him she caught them in the bathroom. Kinji tries once more to explain what really happened, but when Arya asks for proof, he loses his patience and tells her to prove Durandal really exists. Suddenly, she pulls away not knowing what to say and simply explains it is an instinct she cannot shake off. Kinji then says she is simply too obsessed with freeing Kanai. Hearing him say this breaks Arya's heart, so she takes a moment to think and says he is just like everyone else who make her feel stupid and incompetent because she is not as logical as the great Sherlock Holmes. As her sadness turns to anger, she pulls out her weapons and starts firing, but Kinji manages to dodge it and thinks she is even more unstable than when they first met. Later, he meets Shiryuki in the student council office and tells her he will be her only bodyguard in the future. Naturally, Shiryuki gets excited because she has been waiting for this for years. Kinji then asks her why she is alone, and she tells him about the fireworks festival happening tonight. He is surprised she is not going, but after she reminds him that her family still demands the same restricted life she has always lived, he realizes she cannot leave the school grounds for personal matters. Much later, they are on their way back to the dormitory, but Kinji suggests going to see the fireworks. Shiryuki hesitates at first, but after he promises to keep her safe, she agrees, and they take a train to the festival site. Unfortunately, they arrive a bit late, so Kinji apologizes apologizes for not checking the schedule before running off to find some fireworks they can light on their own. At that moment, Shiryuki receives a sinister message, but when Kinji returns, she acts as if nothing happened. After they are done with the fireworks, she suddenly says Arya will steal his heart, but Kinji says that will never happen. Shiryuki then insists it is already happening and hugs him with tears in her eyes before thanking him for helping her experience the outside world. While Kinji tries to figure out what has happened to her, she gathers enough courage to ask for a kiss. However, just as he tries to kiss her, a group of students appears, so Shiryuki steps away to avoid rumors. The next day at school, Kinji continues to watch and soon starts to think all this is useless because he has not detected a single suspicious person in the week. When a student suddenly tells him something strange, he tells Shiryuki to stay still and leaves. Minutes later, he receives a goodbye message from Shiryuki and panics just before class. The teacher appears and asks if Shiryuki has been receiving strange messages from Durandal. For the first time, Kinji fears Durandal might really be real, which means Arya was right all along and he was stupid not to see it. While he continues to panic, Reki calls him to explain where she last saw Shiryuki, but Kinji is still blocked by his feelings, so Reki fires a shot to get him out of there. While running towards the warehouse Reki mentioned, Shiryuki finally meets Durandal, who then promises to spare everyone at Butte High as long as she sticks to the deal and follows him to the European Union. At that moment, Kinji sneaks into the facility and realizes Shiryuki is in the explosive storage room, which means he cannot shoot. He then decides to attack with his knives, only to be knocked down by Durandal. While he is trapped by the ice, Durandal grabs Shiryuki and tries to finish Kinji off, but Arya appears just in time to save him and tells Durandal he is under arrest. Durandal asks if he thinks this performance can stop him, but then Arya reveals she has been falling into his trap this whole time. She learned a while ago that he likes to attack his victims one after another, and that is why she decided to stop being Shiryuki's bodyguard to make him think she was out of the picture. Kinji is surprised she could think so far ahead, but after she frees him from the ice, Durandal drags Shiryuki into the darkness and floods the entire floor with water. Minutes later, Kinji and Arya find Shiryuki chained to the wall with a complicated lock, so they run and help her. As they do, Arya notices the water level rising and gets nervous. Kinji also sees this and asks Shiryuki which way Durandal escaped. After she shows them the ceiling hatch, he tells Arya to go find Durandal because she will not be able to swim if the water level increases further. After she runs off, Kinji continues trying to pick the lock until the water rises to shoulder level. After holding his breath, he finally manages to open the first part of the lock, but then Shiryuki tells him to run and save himself. He refuses and says there is no way he is leaving her behind, but then she cancels the bodyguard contracts so he does not have to save her. Despite this, Kinji insists on risking his life for her, but after a sudden gesture that pushes him, he swims back and decides to use his powers. After kissing Shiryuki, he activates Hysteria mode, easily opens the lock and helps her swim through the ceiling hatch. However, after climbing out, he looks closely at Shiryuki and realizes something is wrong. At that moment, Arya returns, but Kinji stops her from running because he just saw a tripwire trap Durandal installed. After cutting it, Arya notices his calm attitude and realizes he kissed Shiryuki to activate his powers. Anyway, she runs towards Shiryuki to see how she is, but Kinji still suspects something is up, so he asks Shiryuki how she feels. When she reacts as if nothing happened, he tells Arya to get away from her because the real Shiryuki would be too embarrassed to think clearly. Sensing the danger, Durandal presses his sword against Arya's neck and freezes her weapons before saying his true name is actually Jeanne, not that stupid nickname they made up. Arya then says it is impossible because Jeanne d'Arc was burned at the stake, but Jeanne explains the person they burned was an imposter her family put in her place to manipulate history. After she says something about being abandoned by Lupin IV, Kinji tries to save Arya, but Jeanne threatens to freeze her if he takes another step. Fortunately, the real Shiryuki appears and uses her chains to free Arya, who then tells Jeanne to surrender since they clearly outnumber her. At this, Jeanne laughs and says they are still too weak to stop her, before blinding them with a flash and activating all the sprinkler systems. Arya tries to fight, but the effects of Jeanne's ice powers stop her, so Shiryuki rushes to help. She then tells Kinji to take care of Arya so she can deal with Jeanne, but Jeanne says it is pointless before freezing the entire room and dropping her disguise. Seeing the determined look on Shiryuki's face, she says it is pointless to fight because her little training at the shrine has prevented her from reaching true strength. This can only be achieved in the European Union. Shiryuki then responds that she is not like the other maidens and tells Kinji that things might change between them after she makes the next move. Kinji insists she will always be the same Shiryuki to him. Then, she proceeds to use the forbidden arts of Hotoji to cover her sword in flames before revealing that her true name is Shiryuki the Miko. While she attacks Jeanne with an incredible level of speed and skill, Kinji takes the opportunity to apologize to Arya for not believing in her. For once, she decides to forgive him without making a scene, and as she feels much better, they decide to help Shiryuki. Moments later, they see Jeanne is about to use a deadly move, so they jump in and combine their skills to stop her. In the end, Jeanne gets tired of facing them all at once, so she aims at Kinji, but but he has been waiting for this moment. After blocking her, he tells her to surrender, but she refuses and tries to attack him using her powers. Shiryuki immediately breaks the ice, and they finally manage to handcuff her. Days later, everyone takes Jean to the dormitory, but then Shiryuki decides to confess about the medicine. Kinji is surprised to hear Arya did something good for once, and instead of attacking Shiryuki as usual, Arya gives her permission to join the team as her assistant. However, Shiryuki only wants to be Kinji's assistant. Despite this, Arya gives her a key to her room, but when she says they cannot be separated, Shiryuki tells her about the kiss to show how close they are. This finally makes Arya lose control, and Kinji immediately dives back into the water to avoid her wrath. The next day, Kinji is outside the girls' dormitory wondering why Arya suddenly called him to her room. The next moment, she comes out and acts annoyed before dragging him inside and asking him which cosplay outfit he likes best. Before he can answer, she throws him onto the bed and gets on top of him. While she tries to seduce him, his hysteria mode activates, but Kinji already knows Arya could never be bold enough to do this, so he tells Rico to stop acting. After she takes off the costume, he asks her why she has returned, but she begs him to listen to her first. Kinji resists this, so she admits she came to steal him from Arya, and also promises to tell him everything about his brother if he agrees. She offers to please him, but then Arya breaks in through the window and orders Rico to stay away from her servant, while aiming her gun. She demands to know what Rico was doing, but Rico says she could not understand because she is too flat. Kinji is excited. At this, Arya loses control and tries to attack, but Rico stuns her with a flashbang. Moments later, Arya wonders where Rico went, and after seeing her head for the roof, they both run towards the stairs to catch her. On the way, Kinji asks Arya how she knew where he was, and she tells him Muto said something about him going to her room, and she deduced the rest. When they finally reach the roof, Arya and Rico proceed to taunt each other while Kinji watches and wonders where everything went wrong in life and he ended up surrounded by unstable people. He finally stands between them and uses the charm of Hysteria mode to calm them down before telling Rico to consider accepting a plea deal so she can return to school. Surprisingly, Rico easily accepts and says it is only because he asked with that deep voice she loves to hear. While Kinji accepts, she suddenly changed her mind. Arya is convinced this is just another trap and says Rico has to testify to reduce Kanai's sentence if she wants to earn her trust. When Rico also accepts this, Arya is surprised, but Rico says she knows what it is like to love a mother. The next moment she gets emotional and Arya approaches to comfort her, but then Rico finally decides to stop the charade. She explains she only returned because she was kicked out of the European Union after they defeated her. Before her expulsion, a man named Vlad, who is also the second in command in the European Union, apparently took a treasure from her that she desperately wants back, so she asks for help to steal it back. The next day, Rico is back at the academy as if all her past crimes had been forgotten, and seeing this makes Arya lose her patience, but she decides to act calm since they need Rico to lead them to Vlad. Kinji, on the other hand, cannot stop worrying about the consequences of stealing from the European Union until Arya explains it is not actually considered a crime since the European Union is a criminal organization. However, Kinji still has doubts and asks what exactly the European Union is, but Arya tells him to stay out of it and that he does not need to know every detail. Later, Arya gets angry again, but this time it is because Kinji easily agreed to help Rico. When she asks him why, he tells her it is none of her business, but Arya barely notices because she has been trying to figure out why he was in Rico's room. When she confronts him about it, he decides to keep the truth to himself so she does not think ill of him. While she keeps inventing reasons in her head, Kinji slips away and returns to class for an exam. However, just as Sayonaki tells them to begin, Rico approaches and starts bothering him. Kinji is surprised but keeps his voice low to avoid attention, so Rico puts her head near him. Then he notices he is missing his pen and finds it near her, so he slowly reaches out and sees that Sayonaki has been watching him this whole time. While Rico immediately hands in her completed test and runs off, Kinji is punished for getting distracted. After classes, Rico finds him again, so he gives up on avoiding her, but then Shiryuki appears and almost attacks Rico. She then demands to know what is going on, and Rico casually claims to be Kinji's new girlfriend. After a moment of shock, Shiryuki says it cannot be possible since they already kissed the other day, but then Rico laughs and asks if that is all they have done. Shiryuki then decides to attack for the lack of respect, but Rico evades her attack and reveals a provocative outfit before escaping. Shiryuki collapses from embarrassment and twists her ankle, so Kinji carries her and takes her to the infirmary, only to see the nurse is not there. Taking this opportunity, Shiryuki melts the door handle to make sure he cannot escape, then tries to have a special moment with him. Kinji knows this and tries to avoid the situation by making some small talk, but then Shiryuki decides to take advantage of the conveniently broken heater for her benefit and tells him to get close to stay warm. But Kinji knows what she wants, so he tells her to keep her eyes closed and quickly escapes through the window. The next day, Arya and Kinji meet Rico at a cafe to discuss how they can get the treasure back from Vlad. After she shows them photos of his mansion and says they basically have to infiltrate as a team, Kinji gets suspicious and asks why she cannot sneak into the mansion alone since she already knows so much about it. Rico then explains that her treasure is actually kept in an underground facility, and she does not have enough data to know if one person can pull it off. That is why she decided to enlist them. For the plan to work, she says they both have to be hired as helpers in the villa and use that to gain access because a normal robbery would be a bad decision. Arya immediately refuses and says she will not dress up as a maid just for some stupid plan, but after realizing Kinji likes those things, she changes her mind. She then asks Rico if she can at least arrest Vlad because he is also part of the reason Kanai was framed, but Rico says it is pointless because Vlad barely uses the villa. It turns out everything is managed entirely by his helpers, which makes their plan much easier, but Arya no longer wants to help because Vlad will not be there. However, after Rico reminds her that it will just be her and Kinji alone in the villa, Arya changes her mind again. She also reminds Rico of her promise to testify on Kanei's behalf, and after Rico assures her she would not lie about something so serious, Arya explains that this whole arrangement depends on that promise. By then, Kinji is fed up, so he asks Rico what that treasure is, and she explains it is actually her mom's rosary. The next moment, Arya gets annoyed and calls Rico all sorts of names because she helped the bad guys frame Kanei, and now she wants help to get something from her own mother. When Rico further explains that her mother is dead, Arya realizes why the rosary means so much to her and decides to stop arguing about it. Several minutes later, Rico takes her to a fitting room to try on the main outfit, and when they ask for Kinji's opinion, he is left speechless. With the costumes decided, Rico decides to teach Arya how to speak like a true maid and starts by telling her to call him Master Kinji. Unfortunately, the inexperienced Arya had never done this before, so she gets very nervous while trying to say the words. Hours later, she is in class reciting the words like a robot, while Kinji worries if she is really okay. Rico then tells him to come see her later because he also needs special training. Much later, he was heading there when suddenly Jean appears. Naturally, Kinji expects her to want another fight, so he gets ready, but she tells him to relax because she just joined the academy as a transfer student. Despite being surprised by this, Kinji decides to walk away and avoid more drama, but then Jean says she already knows about their plan to infiltrate Vlad's villa. Kinji stops immediately, so Jean explains that Rico was actually captured after her parents died. The man who captured her claimed to be a relative and refused to give her freedom no matter how many times she tried to escape. At some point, he told her the only way to get her freedom was by defeating a powerful member of the Lupin family, which is why she went after Arya. After hearing all this, Kinji asks Jean why she is suddenly acting like a reasonable person. Then, Jean explains that Vlad is a common enemy everyone must defeat together. Kinji decides to ignore this since it barely has anything to do with him. But then Jean shows a sketch of Vlad to show him how dangerous he is. She further explains that the only way to win is to attack his 4 weak points at once. But Kinji wants to take his time and think about all this first, so he heads to the infirmary to see Rico. Once there, he sees a group of girls also heading towards the infirmary, so he hides in the locker and sees Muto, who hides the whole time to see the girls, while Kinji is still trying to understand what is going on. Rico sends a text message asking if seeing so many girls has activated Hysteria mode, but Kinji barely feels anything. She then threatens to expose him if he does not pay attention. He manages it easily without activating Hysteria mode, but then Arya comes in and starts changing. Surprisingly, this is all Kinji needed to activate Hysteria mode. Moments later, Sayonaki appears, and the girls immediately approach him, which makes Kinji think he is finally safe. However, Reki suddenly opens the locker and exposes them, but before they can react, a wolf appears and starts attacking anyone it sees. Then Kinji immediately jumps into action while the others run for safety. After it escapes through the window, Kinji grabs Muto's bike to chase it, but Reki jumps on and says he cannot stop it alone. Minutes later, they see it enter an incomplete building, so Kinji prepares for a fierce battle while Reki explains she might have to eliminate it since she does not have any tranquilizer. While she finds a good spot to shoot, Kinji attacks the wolf and is almost overpowered, but then Reki fires what looks like a warning shot. When he asks Reki why she missed intentionally, she says it has never happened before and whispers to the wolf until it also calms down. Much later, Kinji returns to the dormitory and sees Arya, who has been waiting to demand an explanation of why he was in the locker. Kinji immediately tells her it was all Rico's fault, but Arya starts thinking he was hiding to see Rico and gets even angrier. However, after he admits that most of the time he looked at her, she gets embarrassed and decides to shoot him instead of admitting she likes him. Days later, Arya puts all her training to the test in an outdoor cave, and Rico, who has been watching her, is impressed because she has managed to absolutely master everything about being a maid. After congratulating Arya, she also asks Kinji what he thinks, but he does not know how to act because the outfit still excites him. A couple of days later, the time for the mission finally arrives, so they both get ready and end up waiting way too long for Rico. When she finally appears dressed as someone named Kana, Kinji is left speechless because Kana turns out to be the name of the person he liked in the past. Arya notices his reaction and asks about it, but Kinji quickly changes the subject to avoid a conversation. Minutes later, they arrive at Vlad's mansion and are surprised to see that Sayonaki is the current manager. He is also surprised to see them and is glad there are now powerful Butte helping at the mansion. He then explains to them where they can find their rooms. Minutes later, Kinji had already finished dressing, so he goes to see Arya and finds her deluding herself thinking she is is a princess. After seeing him, she pounces on him and tries to erase the memory from his brain by force. As the days pass, they both perform excellently at their jobs and end up getting permission to use the pool. However, Kinji soon realizes it was a bad idea because he cannot stop looking at Arya. Before she can notice, he drops the drawing used to describe Vlad's weakness, and Arya, who still does not know, starts laughing at Kinji for his poor artistic skills. After explaining what the drawing really is, a lightning storm triggers Arya's fears, so she clings to him while he assures her everything will be okay. Hours later, Rico summons them both to discuss the plan, and Arya reveals she already saw the rosary. However, since Sayonaki is always around, someone needs to distract him long enough for Rico to steal it. This ends up becoming Arya's responsibility. So the next day, she tries to distract Sayonaki with some small talk and realizes why almost every girl in the school cannot think clearly when they are around him. Much later, she meets Kinji and Rico to explain how secure the room is, but Rico does not care about all that since she is determined to get the rosary back at all costs. She then decides Arya should dedicate herself to distracting Sayonaki since she seems to know him a bit more than they do. However, Kinji reminds Arya they need at least 10 minutes to pull off the robbery, so she needs to resist Sayonaki's charms. Rico agrees with this and says they might even need up to 15 minutes, but then Arya asks Kinji if he feels anything about her close relationship with Sayonaki. When he says it is none of his business, she gets excited, but controls herself and asks him who Kana was to him. Kinji once again refuses to answer, so Arya decides to stop questioning him so they can focus on the mission. The next day, the time for the mission finally arrives, so Arya takes Sayonaki for a walk in the garden while she acts like she is interested in him. Kinji sneaks into the underground vault dressed in a costume. After he manages to bypass the security systems and reaches the rosary, Sayonaki suddenly decides to go back inside. Arya panics and informs Rico, who then tells her to find a way to gain a couple more minutes. Seconds later, Kinji receives a transmission from Arya saying she will let him do whatever he wants if he succeeds. And of course, this triggers his state of lucidity and hysteria mode at the same time. By the time he realizes it was actually Rico who was tricking him, it is already too late, so he focuses on getting the rosary. Thanks to Rico's clever tactics, he manages to carry out the robbery and replaces the rosary with a fake. Minutes later, they regroup, but just as Kinji hands the rosary to Rico, she admits this was all a trap she invented herself so the rosary would be stolen for her. The truth is, this rosary will make her strong enough to finally defeat them. At this, Arya demands to know the whole truth while pointing her gun at Rico. She knows there is definitely more to her story about the rosary being a gift from her mom, so Rico decides to explain everything to her. The rosary is actually a family heirloom that was passed down to her when she was first thrown in prison. She had it hidden to make sure no one else could take it, but while she did, she learned that the rosary grants her a sudden surge of strength and power. That was how she managed to escape from prison. The next moment, Rico promises to use that same power to defeat them and finally obtain her freedom by proving she is the strongest in her family. While she continues talking about becoming more legendary than her great-grandfather, she receives a shock and falls unconscious. Then, Professor Sayonaki appears, revealed as the villain, and tells them both to stay still or he will send his wolves to attack them. Kinji is surprised to see it is him who controls the wolves, and after admitting that the one Reki stopped the other day is his servant, he reveals that he wanted to take Rico's blood to perform some research on it. After basically admitting to being a psychopath, he further confesses to being the one who took Rico's blood while she was locked up, and, as it was not enough, he gave Vlad all the inspiration he needed to force her through all those inhuman experiments. However, they soon realized there was nothing special about her. That is why they took the rosary and discarded her. The next moment, he takes the rosary and suddenly starts attacking Rico, leaving Kinji and Arya speechless. When Arya finally demands to know why he does this, he explains that such emotions are necessary to summon Vlad. Before she can ask him what he is talking about, he begins to transform into Vlad, shocking Arya and Kinji. Without a second thought, Arya starts firing, but Vlad's wounds heal almost immediately. The next moment, the wolves charge, but thanks to what Reki showed Kinji the other day, he manages to paralyze them. By then, Vlad has just realized Arya is a tough nut to crack, so he admits he should also have taken her blood and used it to get stronger. When he says he can also use his fangs to extract her blood, Arya finally connects the dots and realizes Vlad is actually a vampire called Count Dracula, who has kept himself powerful all these years by ingesting the blood of strong humans. While he grabs Rico and says he will use her to create a new Lupin family member who is not completely useless, Arya charges and attacks with her swords. Kinji also rushes to drag Rico away from Vlad, but when they reach a safe distance, Rico tells him to run away with Arya, because Vlad is too powerful to be defeated by them. Despite this, Kinji refuses and says they have a chance to win before giving Rico the rosary and explaining how he stole it from Vlad before. Then he tells Rico she does not have to help because he and Arya can definitely defeat an immortal vampire on their own. When he is about to leave, Rico tells him Vlad's last weak point is the center of his chest, so Kinji runs back to the fight and tells Arya. After telling Rico to focus on Vlad's other weak points, Kinji attacks with Arya, but Vlad easily regenerates again and taunts taunts them for thinking Rico could be useful. Then, he unleashes a powerful roar that forces them back and basically knocks them out of Hysteria mode, leaving Kinji much weaker than he already is. Despite this, Kinji continues firing until Vlad throws him out of the building. Fortunately, Rico catches him and mocks the idea of escaping together, but Kinji refuses and says he would never leave Arya, especially when she is putting her life at risk like this. Rico continues fighting Vlad, while Kinji remembers the feeling he had when he was still in Hysteria mode and realizes they still have a chance to win if they pull off the attack together at the right time. By then, Arya is still giving everything she has to hold off Vlad, but then a lightning bolt leaves her paralyzed with fear. Vlad immediately tries to finish her off, but Rico saves her just in time and immediately starts mocking her too, which triggers Hysteria mode in Kinji again. Then he tells them to aim for Vlad's weak points, but to wait until he gives them the order to attack. Arya is a bit skeptical and asks if he is sure this attack will work, but Kinji simply says she has to trust him. The next moment, Vlad attacks again, so they all fire their weapons and Kinji specifically aims for his mouth. After their attack hits, Vlad falls and Arya struggles to believe what she sees. Then she asks Kinji how he knew Vlad's weak point was his mouth. Kinji then explains that Vlad had been protecting his mouth at several points during the fight, which did not make sense considering the fact that his regeneration is instant. He quickly realized that what he had in his mouth could not regenerate, so it had to be the weak point. Kinji tells Rico to celebrate their victory since she really managed to prove she is not the shame of her family. As expected, Rico gets excited because this is all she has really always wanted, but then she decides to be honest with Arya and tells her they will never be close because she does not trust her. Arya is not even surprised to hear this and only cares that Rico testifies in court. The next moment, Rico leaves, leaving Arya confused and wondering if she will really keep her word. A couple of days after this, Kinji is shopping with Arya when he sees someone in the distance who looks a lot like Kana. He tries to stop them, but Arya suddenly gets elated and says her lawyer just called her to inform her that Rico will testify. While she continues to celebrate, Kinji realizes her clothes have become unadjusted, so he tells her like any gentleman would, only to receive a punch in return. The truth about Kinji's brother remains a mystery while his choice between Shiryuki and Arya stays uncertain. He invites others to comment to discover more. Leave a like for the summary and remember to activate notifications for the next post.